Welcome to Continuing Forward. Today, we're very excited to have an interview about homeschool co-ops. I'm Father Hayden Butler from St. Matthew's Church in Newport Beach, and I'm very pleased to be able to sit and chat today with Father Zachary Braddock, who is the Dean of the Cathedral, the Church of the Epiphany, the Diocese of the Holy Cross under Bishop Paul Hewitt. And today we're talking about homeschool co-ops and their place in parish life. And particularly our conversation today will be about how homeschool co-ops can aid in parish renewal. And so, Father Zachary, thank you so much for joining us today. And it's a pleasure to sit down with you.
Thanks for having me.
I was wondering, before we begin, if you could just tell us all about a little bit about your ministry and your work in ministry over the last season and what you're up to now, and what's been going on at the Church of the Epiphany.
Yeah, so the Church of the Epiphany is in Columbia, South Carolina. It's the capital of South Carolina, and we're sort of uniquely located with a lot of military bases and schools and things like that. So we have both a population that is here, but we also have a very transient population that comes through Columbia. So I've been the rector for about 4 years, and before that I was the curate. And it's been very interesting watching the parish grow and change over those years.
That's wonderful. And that must be such a unique opportunity having people kind of come in at various stages of formation and familiarity with the Christian life, and then also knowing that their time may be limited based on their contracts with the military. If we before we get kind of into the proper topic of our interview, how has that sort of shaped and given some character to your parish's life overall? And how does that kind of change the flavor of what goes on there?
Yeah, so one of our big ministries is actually at the University of South Carolina. I don't know if you know Father Paul Stern, but he's on staff here. And he, over the last 20 years or so, has put together the St. Theodore's Chapel and C.S. Lewis Student Center. And, you talk about a transient ministry. He has been there, but every few years, he has an entirely new group of students. Some of them will come to Epiphany. Some of them will stay at Epiphany after they graduate, and most of them move on. And it's been really rewarding to see people come through that ministry, come through Epiphany, and then go off to work or go off to join the military, go off to grad school. And especially for those who stay in an active Christian community, whether it's Anglican or otherwise. The C.S. Lewis Center is very ecumenical. So we have Anglican students, we have Roman Catholic students, there are students there that are Baptist, and every flavor of Protestantism and none at all. And it's been very rewarding to see some of them go on to continue to grow and be formed as Christians.
No, that's such a profound ministry, to be able to be a source of stability and continuous presence to people, especially when they're in such a, by definition, transitional time of life. I remember being a university student feeling just like it was a vagabond in life, not really kind of situated anywhere, and always being able to throw everything I owned into the trunk of a car, and to have someone who's been there and who will be there after you leave. I don't know, that gives you a sense that you can actually plant there, even if you know somewhere deep down that you're going to have to uproot in just a couple short years. No, that's a profound offering to both communities, both the university and the military there. It's on the topic of education, I think, that we can segue into our main question for today. I know you and I have this in common, that both of our parishes have been making forays into homeschool co-op creation to meet the needs of that particular community of people. But I want to focus on what's been going on at the Church of the Epiphany. And so, if you wouldn't mind, could you please just tell us how this particular group has started to meet at your church? What was kind of its origin story, and what place has it taken in relationship to the kind of broader parish life?
Yeah, so I think there's let me back up a little bit just from the actual moment that the co-op began and look a little bit at parish revitalization and then the role that the co-op played in that here at Epiphany.
Sounds great.
So with very often I've heard people say, we'll start a co-op and that will bring people into the church. And that happens sometimes. That isn't what happened here. But so what happened here was Bishop Hewitt was the rector before I was, and a previous rector had given us a gift to um, purchase a rectory and to hire a curate. And so he did that. He brought me on board. So I live very close to the church. I'm able to be here every day. Um, I'm available to the congregation. And I was able to do that on a full-time basis. Very often our clergy aren't able to do that, unfortunately. But because of the former rector's generosity, I'm able to do that. And so one of the things that we started to do was to build up the life of the parish. It was a very typical continuing church. Um, Not a lot of young people, very few children. Um, One of the things that we started doing was the daily office, the morning prayer, evening prayer out of the prayer book. And that really helped us to start growing. So we would get visitors, as all of our churches do. We started making connections with them. We started inviting them to events. Over a few years, we began to start growing. We started getting more families, more children, more young people into the church. So the co-op really began when these families wanted something for their children. It didn't initiate as a let's go out and bring them in. It began as, we have these kids and we're responsible for their Christian formation. We're responsible as parents for their education. And so it started as a way for us to do that very intentionally and in the community that we had begun to build.
There's so much to unpack there, and I know that parish revitalization is a personal prod and a really kind of a pastoral initiative that both of our bishops share and have had a lot of collaboration in, between Bishop Hewitt and Bishop Scarlett in the Diocese of the Holy Trinity. Um, so talk to me a little bit, if you would, about this kind of the kind of gathering around prayer, and just maybe if we could maybe focus on the level of what kind of effects have you started to see on the people in your parish as a result of that, and how do you think that has contributed as they have begun to sort of live by the church's rule of prayer? Could you say a little more about how you see that contributing to their sense of initiative, mission, and identifying and pursuing opportunities to create these kinds of ministries around that rule of prayer in the parish?
Yeah, so one of the things you mentioned was that rule of prayer. Martin Thornton talks a great deal about the threefold prayer, the Mass, the office, and then our private devotions. So one of the things that we do at Epiphany is we celebrate all of the prayer book holy days, some of the big feasts that are on the Ordo calendar that come out from the ACC. We have our Sunday Mass. We have regularly scheduled masses throughout the week. On top of that, we have morning and evening prayer every day. So it's here at the church every morning, every evening, except for Sunday evenings when we have evensong at the C.S. Lewis Center down near the university. And so those provide the bookends, as it will. One of the really encouraging signs of growth that I found here was when parishioners started to say evening prayer at home. And so I had a parishioner come up to me and mention, just sort of off the cuff, that they had been saying evening prayer, and there was a question that one of his kids had about one of the lessons. So once parishioners were following the lectionary, that was a very encouraging sign that, it's not just something that we talk about priests needing to do. It's an active part of the church's life, whether they're here in the church building or whether they're at home or in an airport. I've got a couple of parishioners who travel a lot for work, and they'll take their prayer book and say morning prayer sitting in an airport, and I think that's great.
So to follow up on that, what it sounds like, and I think that this is the purpose, really, is that this rule of common prayer, right? You just highlighted that very explicitly, that this isn't just a regula or a rule for clergy, right? This is something that's meant to be shared by the laity as well, and to kind of draw together people towards a common point of prayer here and a practice of it. Um, this is it seems to be the foundation of a kind of life together in the parish's community. And it's really helpful that you're drawing that out as a pretext to the creation of these kind of smaller communities, these more kind of niche communities, that it's almost as though these are an extension of that common life, that's rooted and grounded in prayer, that Thornton highlights so strongly. So let's talk about, as that has been developing. When along the timeline did the homeschool co-op that meets at your church, when did that start to come about, and how did that come about?
It was 2018, 2019, somewhere in that time frame. That's when it got off the ground. And so it has morphed a little bit over the years. It started out as just a recognition amongst the families in the church that we needed something for the children. We were all in different places. Some of us, take my wife and I, for example, neither of us were homeschooled. So this was a leap in faith for us. It's not something on either of our families that had ever been done before, since the advent of the public school. We were both public school kids. Different families in the group had some level of exposure to homeschooling. None of us had ever jumped into the deep end quite the way that we did with us. So we all started out using our own curriculums, our own sort of methods. Over time, we really settled into using a Charlotte Mason philosophy, specifically with the Ambleside online curriculum. And eventually, we just all found that each of the families was using that curriculum. And that made it very easy to coordinate what we're doing with the co-op with what we're doing at home. And so we can align the books that we're reading, we can align field trips that we want to do, family outings can line up with those as well. And that's how we got to where we are today.
It's remarkable that there's that kind of integrity just kind of developed organically. And I'm wondering, in one of our conversations outside of this interview, you highlighted the connection between specifically Charlotte Mason and the Anglican spiritual tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Could you draw that out for some of our listeners? I don't think that's widely known.
So Charlotte Mason was Anglican. She was late 19th century. I don't believe that she was a Tractarian, but she was Anglican, and the Lord forms a core part of her educational philosophy. One of her big principles is that children are born humans. And to me, that lines up very, very well with the fact that we're created in the image of God. We're not less of a person because we're 2 years old or 10 years old than we are at 18 or 75.
That's a provocative insight right there, because it seems like a lot of curricula, whether homeschool or not, sort of start from a different kind of assumption about the person, that they're this kind of blob of clay that you're drawing out, you're reducing, right? You're drawing out into a particular shape, and that there isn't a kind of intrinsic image that's present there from the beginning. Yeah, no, there's so much to be said just about that. What it seems though is that, if as you all kind of gravitate towards this Charlotte Mason curriculum, who has, who's steeped in the Anglican tradition, even if it is of a slightly different stripe than an Anglo-Catholic expression, you have this. It seems like what you would have coalesce there is a kind of harmonizing of the kind of formational and educational goals of the home, the formational educational goals of the school, and those would comport very neatly with the formational and educational goals of the church. Um, as a former classroom teacher, we always talked about, the kind of pipe dream of, oh, if only you could line up those kind of three settings and get them working together, you could actually, have a lot more impact.
Mhm.
And it seems like that kind of organically developed there. So can you, how have you seen that? How have you experienced, the dialogue happening between those kind of three institutions there?
So one really cool thing that I have seen is that, so at the beginning of each Friday morning when the kids get together, we'll have a scripture reading, we'll have prayer, we'll have a hymn. And one of the things that's been really cool to see is a hymn that we've sung at the co-op and a hymn that we've sung at home, and then have it sung on a Sunday morning. And that has been really cool to see, just with my own children, but with all of the kids, just that they are being steeped in the tradition. One of the hymns that my family loves is Christ the Fair Glory. And we've got that coming up in a few weeks for the Feast of St. Michael and All Angels on the 29th of September. And they've sung it before at the co-op. We've sung it at home. And just that integration of a spiritual tradition has been really wonderful. Something that you mentioned a minute ago, the word formation, I think that's important. Um, we're not creating the kids. They're not, you mentioned clay, they're not blank. They're not an empty space that we're putting a new person into. God has done that.
Hmm.
They are a person. Our job as parents, as priests, as those who are interested in the future of the church is to take what they already are and to form them, to mold them. Um, God has given us the design and we need to participate in that.
Yeah.
So formation is a very important word, I think.
And in that you're also highlighting maybe another maybe not talked about as much aspect of formation, which is this idea of transmission, right? Of transmitting and traditioning, the next generation of a church, of a home, of a school, of a sort of generation of people in society. I wonder if we could turn our attention to that a little bit as an aspect of parish revitalization. Um, when a parish starts to think about how it's passing on either its spiritual tradition or any of its sort of cultural values to the next generation. Um, I think if it's being careful, it forces that parish to look at what it is passing on
Yeah.
and how it is passing on those things. And that seems to be a kind of sticking point, in different parish kind of cultures, how they're going to do that, what they're going to pass on, and what is most important to convey.
Mhm.
Education is, of course, a major vehicle of this traditioning that takes place in a parish or a school or in a home. So I'm wondering, as you all have seen this schooling community arise, how has that sort of reciprocally forced you as a parish to kind of look at how you are traditioning the next generation of Christians?
So one of the unique things that the parish has seen is that, the parish is being used. It's not just a building that's open on Sunday mornings. Um, One of the criticisms of homeschooling that I hear relatively often is this idea of that homeschooled kids sit at home with a book in a corner all the time. And that's not true. How do you socialize your kids is a question that we hear a lot. But so at Epiphany, at least, the kids are in church on Sunday morning. Many of them come to church on Wednesday night. Um, Many of them are here if we have a prayer book holy day. One of the things that we've worked on are having high masses once a month for big Feast of Apostles, the Transfiguration, the Assumption, things like that. On Tuesday night, something that we've started is having community singing practice. And so it's not unusual to have 30 people come into the church on a Tuesday evening, many of them children, just to sing. And so some of that is going over the music that we'll have on Sunday, the following Sunday. Some of it is preparing for music that we'll have at a big feast day. So if the choir is going to sing an anthem, we'll go over that at community singing practice. Some of it is just singing to teach the children how to sing. You know, musical education has basically disappeared in this country. But I have a very musical parish. We sing a lot. Part of that is my organist and choir director, the clergy, and the parents bringing their kids, getting together just on a random Tuesday night on a regular basis to practice the music that we use in our liturgy, and by extension, learning about music. So it is not unusual for a child at Epiphany to be in a group of children 3 to 4 times in any given week. And so that's really helped, I think, to further build the community. And, you know, if you sing something often enough, it becomes something that gets stuck in your brain. And, you know, it's a hymn that all your kids know. After after time, it just becomes part of their lived experience. And so I think that's one way that we are passing that tradition on to the kids. Several of the fathers in the parish serve at the altar.
Hmm.
So what's really cool is seeing a son and his father at the altar together. So we've had acolyte cookouts where we'll have an acolyte rehearsal. We'll teach a little bit about what we're doing at the altar, why we're doing it that way, and then we'll have fellowship together.
Hmm.
And so in all of these different respects, again, you go back to that word formation, we're forming these children, we're forming these young people into being the next generation of adults and leaders in our churches.
Hmm. The picture you're painting there is such a kind of a rich is one of a rich interconnectedness. There's so many things that are mutually reinforcing each other by the sound of that. What they see the parents doing, what they see someone else's parents doing, and it occurs to me as you're saying that, you know, again, this is one of the other kind of perplexities of time in the class in like a formal like a classroom setting is one of the difficulties, whether it's stated or not, is the just the structural idea that, okay, we're going to send our kids to a place where they're going to undergo a 12-year sequence of learning, but the sort of unstated message is that at a certain point you just stop learning, right? You stop
Yes.
forming, you're formed, you're done. And so this is just a temporary season of your life where we're going to subject you to it. We're not going to be, we're the people who are already done with that. But we're going to send you now to it. And there's just a kind of, those two things grind against each other in a way that if it's not that way, where you have uh, a bunch of adults that are both parental and also adjacent to the parental, like the kind of the village around them of plausible Christian adults. If all of them are continuously learning, they're practicing new skills that maybe they weren't initially like comfortable with. Singing is such a great one because few people feel confident singing, especially when they get started. And then but if you're watching the grown-ups do new things, do scary things and grow through that experience, what an amazing model for a group of young people to see that the adults are people who never stop learning, who never stop kind of growing up, so to speak. And for whom it's not just, okay, we got through our time and now we're going to sort of haze you by putting you through your time now, and then you can put it on the next group that comes after you. Instead, now this is just a sort of community culture where everyone is a learner, right? Everyone is learning with and around and from each other, and the adults are more advanced in that, and it has that kind of gravity that draws them up into that. Again, that overcomes so many just kind of structural barriers that tend to happen in like a conventional classroom setting. And like you said, the issue, the kind of cliche about the homeschool kid who can't talk to anybody. In this case, I would imagine that the kids feel, most of them feel pretty confident, kind of talking to multiple, adults in the parish and communicating with a priest, communicating with someone else's parents, and just the kind of broader social skills of being able to talk to people that aren't just kids your age. That seems to me like a more maximalized kind of like socialization there. How has that affected the adults in the meantime? You kind of talked about like what the kids are doing in that. If we could focus for a moment on how has, this is maybe a different way of looking at the homeschool co-op. How has the homeschool co-op put pressure on the adults to continually kind of form?
Yeah. Let me back up for just one second. I want to follow up on something you said. Um, I think very often with education as it's viewed in the popular culture, we view it simply as job training. What do you want to do with your life? I.e., what kind of job do you want? And while the work that we do is not unimportant, I think if we only view education as training for an employment, I think we miss out. We miss out on a great deal of what it can be for us and where it can take us. So I think looking at education as, again, formation, but as a way to grow in virtue, as a way to grow in knowledge and love of God and of his creation and of our fellow creatures. I think when you look at education like that, it gives it a very profound difference from the prevailing view in the society. In terms of the adults, so many of them, of us, have been fascinated by the kids and the things that they come up with. You were talking a minute ago about kids interacting with adults, and in my mind, I'm thinking about this 7-year-old who walks up to me a couple of weeks ago and he goes, "Good morning, Father Braddock. It's a lovely day, isn't it?"
That's
And it
awesome.
was. It was bright and sunny, and the temperature had cooled down a little bit. And it was really cool to have him walk up and just reach out and shake my hand and start having a conversation. Um, and it's been interesting watching these kids grow because the co-op has been happening for a number of years now. And, we've all been homeschooling for several years before that. And just watching them engage with us in ways that I don't think we engaged when we were their age has been really cool to see.
Hmm.
Um, we were talking about the acolyting a minute ago. Watching these young boys take that very seriously. Watching the young ladies who are going in and doing altar guild with their mothers take it very seriously. We've got several teenage girls that are on the altar guild as full members. They either did it with their mother or they went in and did it with one of the older ladies on the altar guild. And then they have taken that on themselves. And so I think there's a great sense of joy amongst the older population in the parish. It's seeing this level of growth and seeing this level of maturity in some of these young people that you very often don't see in the wider world.
Hmm.
And it's also, I think, forced us to go, okay, so we have a church and we have young people in the church. What do we as a community, as a parish family, need to do to provide for them? This was not the case here, but I've seen churches before where, for example, in the church, there's no changing table. If you want to have families with young children, including babies in your church, that's something very basic that we can have, that we can provide for them, that will help to include them in the parish.
So along the lines of those kinds of insights, that's a really helpfully granular insight, right? Where it really does make a difference if you have a changing table, and we experienced that at St. Matthew's as well. So let's talk a little more about that. What were some of the sort of specific and granular changes that an aspiration to school your children as an extension of the parish's life? What were some of the granular and practical and concrete changes that you've noticed that needing to happen and that have been accomplished because you kind of set out in this direction together?
So one thing that really helps is communication.
Hmm.
Ensuring that people know what's going on is sometimes overlooked, but I think is a very important part of building any community. And if you want to build a community in your parish, people need to know what's going on, when it's happening. Sometimes you may need to explain why you're doing things. So one of the things that we have done is from time to time, we'll teach on the liturgy. On Ash Wednesday, why do we do all of the stuff that we do? On Candlemas, why do we bless all these candles? It's not just a way of ordering candles in bulk to get a discount. It's actually because we're setting apart all of these candles to be used during the church's worship through the year. So I think communication is very important. Ensuring that the people who need to be in the church are able to get in. So if you're going to build a co-op, the person that's running it needs to have a key to the church. But you also don't want to have so many keys floating around that, you've got keys with people who don't need to be in. And so I think having an awareness of your building and your surroundings is useful as well. And also, if you want to build a parish, I think being welcoming. And that's, it seems like such a basic thing, but being intentionally welcoming to people who come in without then being overbearing. Invite someone to coffee hour, but don't escort them down the stairs to the parish hall.
Hmm.
We've had people who have come in, families, and who have gone, we might come down, and then they don't, but then a few weeks later, they'll come back.
Hmm.
But I think if you sort of force people into coming to coffee hour, if you force them into having fellowship, especially if they're coming from a tradition where they are unfamiliar with what's going on, they may need time to process. And so that friendly, welcoming face with an open door that you don't force them through, I think goes a long way.
Hmm. I want to follow up on that. Before we do, I want to also open up an opportunity for any of our viewers who are with us to ask any questions. We'll be addressing those in about 5 minutes, and just type them into the chat bar right here. To go back to your point, Father Braddock, have you noticed have you noticed a couple of different aspects of this? Have you noticed that the homeschool co-op has contributed to more of an openness or has it served as a group through which people feel more comfortable kind of getting used to the parish's environment and maybe being drawn in? Or on the flip side, has it contributed to already existing parishioners being more equipped and opened to be more welcoming, as you put it, to people who are maybe not yet part of the parish community. So how has it affected that kind of the opening of that door to the parish and the welcoming quality of the parish?
So the co-op has not been a tool to bring people into the church in terms of turning people in other churches into parishioners. The families that we've got in the co-op are either families from our church, or there are a few from other traditions. We have a Baptist family, we have a Roman Catholic family, and they're all very strongly rooted in their traditions. What it has done is it's given us a way of interacting with those other traditions. There has been some curiosity in terms of those families visiting Epiphany and getting to know more about us. It's also been an opportunity for people in the parish to see other Christians from other traditions. Um, it's been an opportunity for them to witness all of the good things that have been happening in the co-op.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes we'll have events in the parish where people from the co-op will attend. And that's been really fun to see. I'm not sure if I answered that question precisely.
No, you did, and actually, a question that got asked in our chat bar here is a helpful follow up to that. What when we talk about education, we're looking at some level at what kind of person is this producing, and so could you comment a little bit to the extent you're able, since it's a kind of young program, about the quote unquote results, as one of our viewers is asked, what results are there from the homeschool and co-op? Are there any stories of graduates who kind of move on, and with that, is there a sense of people who've been a participant in the co-op, who've since gone elsewhere, either because they've moved, because you have a community that tends to move around a bit? How do they reflect back on the experience of it? And have you been able to gather any kind of insight from those kind of conversations?
So we haven't had any children who have aged out, as it were. Um, we have kids from newborn up until about 15. So it'll be a couple of years before we have kids go off to college. Um, we have had a couple of families who have moved away. Um, some of them have been just logistical reasons. Some of them have moved because the parents moved for work.
Hmm.
We've been able to keep connected with those families. So one thing that we do is the moms that are in the co-op on a day-to-day basis have a monthly book group. And so they've been able to keep those mothers from the other families involved that way. And then we have events from time to time throughout the year. So we have something that we call recitation night, where the kids memorize something. It could be a poem, a hymn, some scripture verses, a part of a play. We had a kid do a bit of Hamlet. And what we do is we turn that into an opportunity for the kids to showcase some things that they've learned. And we'll invite all these other families to come and just join us, just have fellowship with us. And that's been very good. We do the same thing for field trips. So we've taken some nature outings. We've gone to a science lab at the university. There was one year that the father of one family was a biology professor down at the university. And so he let the kids come and look at the equipment in his lab and do some very small experiments. And that was a whole lot of fun. And for things like that, I think you can continue to invite people to be involved and to continue to be a part of an extended family if they're still within physical distance, to be able to do that.
Hmm. So as we started to draw near to the end of our time here, I imagine a number of our viewers who will be watching this interview may have considered something like this in their parish, or maybe talking with their vestries about it, or with different parents around the parish. I'm wondering, what counsel might you give to a parish that's considering a homeschool co-op, and What have you learned from your experience that you might do differently if you were to do it, if you were to start over again? And how would you encourage a group that may see that first step as an almost insurmountable step?
So I think community is key. I don't think this is something that you can have one person or two people do by themselves, at least not for very long. And so I think building a community is one of the key elements to starting a co-op. So that may mean that you may need to wait for a few years before you can start an official co-op in your parish, or start a co-op that isn't official but is meeting at your church. And so you may need to participate in one that's either at a different church or in your community, in the town, the city that you live in. And I think you build those connections and you start to get to know people, and you get people to start to know you. And there are people out there that are looking for something like this.
Mm.
So I think once you find those people and once you start to build relationships with them, you can start to put together a group that can support each other, can pray for each other, and you can start to build something concrete in your particular location. If you're talking to your vestry, definitely have them pray for you. Have them pray for the families. You may not even know who they are yet, but I think you need to be steeped in prayer. And I think you need to have an idea of where you want to go. Do you want it to be a specifically Anglican co-op? And if so, how are you going to approach that? Is it going to be something that's more generically Christian? And again, how are you going to approach that in terms of the tradition that you pass on to the kids that you're forming?
No, it seems like that was the beginning. That's the thing that's anchoring, your experience at Church of the Epiphany is that again, we return to that rule of prayer, right? When we begin to pray in community, these things become more plausible. Um, my last question for you, Father Braddock, and I'm so sad that we're drawing near our time here, is what's next for you all? What do you hope to maybe see develop in this part of your church's ministry in the next maybe 3 to 5 years?
So for right now, we're continuing on with what we're doing, looking for opportunities for the kids to continue growing. As the kids are becoming older, their interests are diversifying and becoming more specific for each individual kid. And so one thing that I'm looking at are what are some opportunities that we can take a kid who's interested in architecture, for example. Again, as we said earlier, education, I don't think should be about job training.
Mm.
But if you're going to live as a virtuous member of the body of Christ, you're going to need to do something to turn around and raise your own family. And so one of the things that I'm thinking is, how can you take this child that's interested in architecture and give them the opportunities to grow and to learn about that specific field? We're always looking for new opportunities to get the kids out into nature, new aspects of God's creation for them to see and learn about and to grow. And, always looking for new families to come into the church, because as the kids that we have are getting older, we're going to have space at the bottom end of the ages for new children. And how do you take, if you're a parent whose kids are growing, what gifts do you then have that you can use to help someone who's just having their first child now? And again, that goes back to the community. It goes back to the parish family. And I think that's key.
No, that's it. You're already looking at replicating into the next the next group of people who are having kids and are bringing this up. You're preparing the way for them. I can't think of a more marvelous way to orient oneself. That's remarkable. It's not just for you; it's for those that are coming after you too.
Yeah.
Father
You know,
Braddock.
where's
Yep.
the church going to be in 10, 20, 100 years? And, where's the church going to be each year until the Lord comes back? You know?
Would that were all, that's how we were thinking about all these things. Yeah.
Yep, indeed.
Father Braddock, thank you so much for sharing this part of your parish's ministry with us. It's been an illuminating conversation. Really appreciate all of it.
Thanks for having me. It's been great to be here.
Well, friends, this concludes our interview for today, but we hope that you'll join us on October 3rd at 12 o'clock Eastern as we get to experience a conversation between Father Wade Miller, rector of St. Philip's Anglican in Blacksburg, Virginia, part of the APA, who will talk about parish renewal and ministry to a college town. And he'll be interviewed by Father Mark Perkins, who is a member of the Continuing Forward Executive Committee. But for now, let us pray to close our time. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up his countenance upon us and give us peace this day and forevermore. Amen.